back to the Nexus podcast. Noam Moshe from Claroty Team 82 is back. It's all Team 82 lately here on the podcast. And that's obviously a good thing. No doubt you've seen the headlines this past week about IOCONTROL, a new nation-state cyber weapon malware that has been used by an Iranian-linked APT, targeting civilian infrastructure, critical infrastructure here in the U.S. and Israel and probably elsewhere. Noam and the rest of Team 82 took apart a sample of the malware and published a technical blog that we're linking to here in the show notes. But I wanted to get Noam on the podcast to kind of just, from a high level, go through the research and what it means for security leaders around the world trying to figure this out. And so let's bring in Noam and get going. How you doing, man? Good to talk to you again.
Hey, Mike. How are you? Haven't been long.
Good. Hasn't been long, not at all. But that's, like I said, that's a good thing. Congratulations on this research. I mean, it never ceases to fascinate me what you guys are able to uncover and some of the directions you take. I mean, some of stuff like this must be fun for you guys. I mean, there's obviously a serious aspect to this, but from strictly a research point of view, it's got to be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always love looking at new tech, new malware, real stuff that's happening user all around the world. And I think it's a blast, always will be. And yeah, definitely when we have an event like this, it's a highlight for sure.
Right, for sure. So I know that you guys analyzed the sample of this, found it on malware, on VirusTotal. How would you describe this malware? I mean, there seems to be some backdoor capabilities. Is it disruptive, destructive? What's your characterization of the malware?
So I would say it has the major functionality of it is a backdoor, basically acting like a rat, allowing the attackers access remotely to infected devices. Basically, what it does is that immediately on infection, it will call back to the CNC server of the attacker, reach back, tell it, hey, I've been infected, here are my details, and then it will sit and wait for the attackers to issue commands to it. This is the main functionality loop of this malware.
There are further exploits once they're on the device, obviously, a further activity, right?
Yeah, of course. Like after some unpacking for the malware, it will call back to the CNC server, and then the attackers can fully control the host that was infected with this malware, meaning they can simply get some information about the platform, what is the platform, architecture, all of this nice stuff. They can issue OS commands to it, saying, hey, execute this and give me the output, which is obviously a way to basically fully control this device. They also have some scanning capabilities and, of course, a kill switch for the malware, basically telling it, hey, I want you to stop running. And this is the way of the attackers to basically stop this attack.
I know it's not entirely in scope for what you guys do, but what do you imagine the end goal for the attackers to be in using this malware? What's the strategic advantage here? Are they showing capabilities, or are they trying to instill some chaos by disrupting, in this case?
I would say both, because the minute they infect a machine with their malware, then now they are able to fully control it. They are able to issue commands for it to execute. And well, the end game is very varied, because they can either, of course, use this machine to move laterally in the network, maybe attack some other devices, improve their strong hold over the network and move laterally. And of course, they can simply cause denial of service, meaning stopping services, deleting files, basically disrupting the behavior of this attacked machine. And once again, like in this case, the targets was mainly OT and IoT centric, meaning it could be like a module on a gas station, it could be a firewall, access point, an IP camera, a very varied set of targets. So, of course, one capability that is very clear for this malware to do is simply disrupt the machine, the target that it got infected with it. Because we see this backdoor capability, the capability to fully control and execute arbitrary commands on the device, we can say that the result or the outcome is varied. They could denial of service the device, they could stop it, cause some disruptions, and of course they can use it for lateral movement, to move laterally in the network of the organization they infected.
So I believe in the blog you guys wrote about the modular configuration of the malware. Um, how are they able to? I mean, how significant is that in terms of a design decision from them, from the attacker's point of view, and how are they able? Is that how they're able to tweak it to affect either IoT or OT or SCADA, et cetera?
So the attackers did a few methods of hiding stuff in their malware, basically protecting it against users identifying it and noticing they are infected. Like you said, one of the ways they did it is to simply encrypt the entire configuration of the malware. So let's say the malware connects to the CNC. Well, instead of seeing in clear text what is the IP or DNS name that it tries to connect to, instead it is saved in an encrypted format in the malware's memory, and then only on use, whenever the device actually needs to use this encrypted configuration. So, for example, the CNC server or different commands that it can execute, only then it will decrypt this encrypted segment and access this configuration. Now, this gives the malware both camouflage against people identifying itself, as well as being able to edit and alter its behavior, and specifically its configuration on the fly. Because by simply injecting the malware, the binary, the compiled binary, with a new configuration file blob, the attackers could change its behavior. For example, what is the C2 infrastructure or DNS name the malware tries to reach back to. So this is one way that attackers both did some camouflage and did dynamic functionality.
In the blog, you write about these attacks on Orpak and Gasboy devices. They're used in gas stations, gas delivery, etc. Um, just from a high level, maybe tell the listeners a little bit about what was happening in those attacks, because I think it's important to this whole narrative.
So like you said and I said as well, like that the targets for this attack are varied, ranging from more ICS OT realm to IoT. The first sample of the malware that we reached and gained access to was a sample that targeted the Orpak ecosystem. Now Orpak is some sort of a module that handles POS, point of sale, for the Gasboy gas station modules, meaning it is mostly used in gas stations all around the world. From our investigation, we saw that the targeted gas stations were located mainly in the United States and Israel. However, by targeting these gas-related devices, the attackers gain external access to these devices, and could, of course, cause denial of service to critical infrastructure like gas. Other than Orpak, which is the one attacked ecosystem, they attacked a wide range of different ecosystems. So, for example, IP cameras that we saw them targeting, routers, firewalls, and a wide range of different IoT devices as well. However, once again, the main goal is to basically gain initial access to a device, infect it with the malware, and then to be able to fully control it through the CNC server.
And I think we should talk about kind of the OT part of this. Is there the blog does mention PLCs, HMIs, etc. How are they? Is it a direct attack on the PLCs or the engineering software, etc.?
So
Tell us a
mainly,
little bit about what's
in our
happening there.
looks, the targeted devices were mainly internet exposed devices, meaning
Hmm.
devices that expose one or more of their services to the internet. In the realm of PLC, we saw mainly Unitronics devices being targeted and being infected with their malicious malware. Now, Unitronics, and more specifically the Unistream lineup, it's once again an Israeli vendor, an OT vendor that manufactures uh, HMIs and PLCs that are combined into one machine. And by targeting them, yeah, they could obviously fully control the process, the physical process that these devices govern on. So in the realm of more OT, we saw Unitronics devices being targeted.
And we should mention that those Unitronics devices were, this all came to light at the end of 2023 now, more than a year ago, in attacks against water facilities, correct?
So Unitronics offer a wide lineup of devices. In
Yep.
2023, we researched and presented on the Unitronics VisiLogic lineup, or Univision, where we managed to dissect another attack made by an Iranian attacking group targeting Unitronics VisiLogic PLCs plus HMIs. In this case, we can say that even more lineups were targeted. However, in that prior case, no unique malware, OT and IoT malware, was identified and was used, and instead they used the more popular download logic procedure of PLCs, where they simply overrode the PLC and HMI logic directly to the machine, and that way they were able to alter its behavior. In this case, we are talking about a backdoor malware that targets more Linux machines, which the new lineup of Unitronics are. So that's why we see this change of pace.
I think we've talked about this before, but and I know it's not entirely applicable here, but just why don't we see more attacks on OT devices directly? Is it just they're so proprietary, or there's just too
So,
much complexity? It's not worth the investment. Like,
so some are, for example, many OT devices do not support the regular protocols that you and I know of. Some do. For example, I know Unitronics do support SFTP, for example, which is a modern known protocol. However, most of them do not. Other than that, we are many times talking about different esoteric architectures. So, for example, in the case of Orpak, one of the things that was the most difficult to work with was the fact that the device was running ARM 32-bit Big Endian, which is a very, very legacy, not used anymore CPU architecture, which made it very hard to work and simulate the device on. So even if we have this malware that simply works on Linux, just building it and being able to test it is super hard without actually having a physical device in hand, which is one of the reasons why we usually don't see such attacks.
mhm.
And lastly, well, many OT devices simply do not run modern OSs. It's not like they are based on Linux. Some do. We do see an increasing number of SCADA related equipment using Linux. However, most devices surely don't. They could be running some kind of RTOS or a different architecture, which is not modern. And that way, to work with them, you need to build very custom tools,
Right.
tailor made.
Yeah, I mean, in this malware, there's some interesting decisions they made. We've already covered some of them, but just I know in the throughout the piece, there's a couple of mentions of there being, like, for example, at the start of your research, zero detections on virus total for this malware, and even today there are still relatively few. Any idea why that's so?
So once again, this is because the weird CPU architecture and many
Mm,
antivirus engines simply not supporting it. Uh, so that's one reason. Also, the developers of the malware performed some forensic measures that will make actually investigating this malware a little bit harder. For example, the entire malware is packed using UPX with a corrupt header, so you won't find strings, you won't find logic that you can analyze only after unpacking the UPX You will find the actual malware's logic. Also, like we mentioned before, it has encrypted configuration section, meaning you won't find the strings that you could be used to identify what it does. For example, run OS commands, connect to C2 infrastructure, stuff like that. And lastly, uh, most of its network connectivity is done in an encrypted manner. So, for example, to actually know the C2 IP address, meaning translate it from the DNS name to the IP address, they use DNS over HTTPS, meaning they do not send a clear text DNS packet, and instead they translate the host name of their C2 into IP using Cloudflare's API. Then they do not open like some sort of an encryption protocol to their C2, and instead they use MQTTS, once again using TLS. So even if you would run the malware and want to see what it connects to, you only see the IP addresses that it connects to, and not the actual inside of each packet.
And what were they doing for persistence, for example? Like obviously getting on the device is one thing, but you don't want to be detected. You want to stay there.
Yes.
What played into that?
So once again, they it has some variance based on the actual architecture of the device they use. The general thing they do is to simply add themselves as a boot script in initd, systemd, stuff like that.
Mm,
Once again, we see some variance because, for example, one target will not have initd and the other one will. So they need to be able to accommodate these different small changes. However, yeah, once the malware runs for the first time, it installs an actual backdoor on the device that will make sure it is being ran every time that it is executed. So even if the device will get reboot or for some reason the reason the malware will crash, it will still reboot itself and call back to the attacker's C2.
yeah. So it survives the reboot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, and so the MQTT channel comes up here again, and I think it came up in the Ruiji research that you guys published not too long ago as well. Um, what's the role here? What's the importance of using that protocol?
So basically, they needed a way for the malware to call back to the attacker's C2 infrastructure. And we do see MQTT as a very popular IoT protocol being used.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it makes sense for devices to connect to servers around the world using MQTT. Also, because they did MQTTS, which is basically MQTT over TLS, the protocol is also encrypted, meaning the traffic is encrypted. But basically, they needed a way for all malwares to connect back to one central machine, their C2, and to be able to both receive messages from the malware, meaning, hey, this is my status report, this is my information, and also to be able to send it commands and receive the outputs of these commands. So for that role, MQTT was a perfect fit. Of course, they could have made some kind of protocol on their own on top of HTTP or whatever they want, but this is what they chose, which makes sense.
This is there's so many aspects to this. This thing's pretty wild. I mean, like, how long does it take you guys to kind of map this out and before you're actually ready to publish something? This is months and months of work.
So we did have the analysis ready before we released it,
Sure.
but we want to make sure that uh, vendors are notified and that we won't simply drop it out there into the abyss and then it could compromise the entire thing. So it did take some time to notify people, to notify different organizations to make sure that it is clear and we are able to securely, responsibly disclose this information about this
Hmm.
OT IoT malware being used in the wild.
Another thing I wanted to point up too. There's some screenshots in the blog that were obtained from Telegram, and obviously they're. I'm always curious why they're so public um, with their activity on channels like Telegram, and I'm sure that's probably a private channel or whatever. But
Well, many
What?
times this political motivated attacks, meaning
Mm,
it's not an attack motivated by different reasons, but instead it is a politically motivated attack. And because of that, when they attack different systems, they would want to induce fear. They would want to basically publish their findings in a way, or basically publish their achievements of being able to hack their way into different infrastructure. So this is the reason why we see it, because the attacker's main goal here, at least at the start, was to basically reduce morale, increase fear, and this is why they did it. Uh, they did not disclose about every attack they did, meaning most of the
right.
targets for this malware are unaware that they were attacked. There is no release saying, hey, we attacked this and that company. This was more opportunistic and basically trying to increase their foothold.
Hmm. All right. So that's a good place to kind of wrap up with the last question. Just from a defender's point of view, I know that our blog contains a lot of indicators of compromise and other technical details that can be used to help detect whether you're infected or not. But from a defender's point of view, what should they know? What's the takeaway here? Because I mean, maybe not everyone's a direct target of this group, but seems to be that there could be some collateral damage here. I mean, what's your take for defenders? What should they be doing about this?
So I think this attack was opportunistic attack targeting mainly internet exposed devices. So I would say the first and most important tip is to not be a target by not being exposed. Meaning, if you have your devices, even if they are patched, even if they are good, unless you have real business logic to actually to expose them to the internet, they should never be. And if you have a need for it, maybe do it in a secure form, like a VPN or some kind of secure remote access solution. So I would say this is the most important tip that I would give, to simply make sure your security posture is good, you are not exposing any devices to the internet, and you know what you exposed. After that, well, I would say the second most important thing is simply having good network hygiene, meaning if your device was attacked and was compromised, be able to you need to make sure that the attackers cannot move laterally, cannot leverage the way deeper into your organization, and you need to be able to isolate them in their compromised environment. And lastly, like you said, we released quite a few sets of IOCs, which basically tells you if you were or were not compromised by this attack. So feel free to use them to check for different breadcrumbs of the malware on your systems.
All right, man. It's good stuff. It's really good work. It's really important work, and congratulations. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's always a pleasure.
All right, man. Have a good day.
Bye bye.